Welcome back to Frostpunk 2, where things are going okay. We've got quite a bit of starving people, as you can tell by their little chili bowl icon that's overflowing with black ink.
A little texture never hurt.
And we've also got a little bit of a squalor and crime issue, like all good civilizations. I've also come to upset some of the factions over the past couple months. No one ever said that our society would be perfect, but the plan for today is to make things a little bit better by colonizing the nearby city of Winterhome, which, I'm gonna be honest, I forgot where it's at. I found it last episode, but I haven't played since then, so we're gonna have to find it again later. For now, I just want to focus on improving our home before we go and try to move into another one. One of the first things we're gonna need to do is address the squalor, since, well, I think it's been an issue basically ever since the beginning of the game, and has now led to the point where people are just pissing on my factory walls and disabling them every couple days. And admittedly, this was most likely my fault, since it's pretty apparent that I almost entirely ignored a major part of the research tree. I never even researched sawmills, and I don't even want to know what the other technologies are that I'm missing out on besides that. I mean, it probably won't matter anyway if it hasn't until now, right? I'm going to make the educated decision to continue ignoring that research and learn more about the waste repurposing facilities instead, which should extremely decrease our squalor and increase our production of materials. I mean, it's kind of like the most obvious thing to research, and shows how little I pay attention to what we actually research. So while my top scientist worked on that, I decided to also build some ventilation towers, which should help reduce our squalor in the meantime. To be honest, I have no idea where this building even came from. I just noticed it on my hotbar and figured I should probably build it, so here we are. We do have to build some more neighborhoods first though, since the ventilation towers have to have somewhere to go, because apparently you can't just build ventilation towers wherever you want. Even if it is for the good of the people and cleaning the polluted air, you can only clean the air within cul-de-sacs. Sorry anyone else living on the other side of this glacier of an earth, or to anybody who has to go to work. Yeah, sorry, only the residents of Palm Avenue get to live the healthy long lives, I guess.
Rip Grandma! Rip Grandma, you're dead now!
One horrible thing we shared, though, was starving, which was still affecting everyone living here, since most of our deposits were beginning to run out, and a lot of people have moved in. I also realized that I don't remember the last time I built a hospital or a research building, so it's probably a good time to add some of those too. Look, I've had a lot to deal with so far, between riots, thieving kids, and religious cults. I haven't had the time to sit down and focus on our civilization. And this time wouldn't last long either, because just as I was getting comfortable with our town, the Evolvers decided to take to the streets in protest, claiming that I'm a bad person for burning oil in our generator, even though it seems they've forgotten that's what I had to do. We were literally going to die if I didn't switch over from coal when I did. I basically saved all of us by switching over to oil, and it seemed pretty obvious that this was nothing more than a weak ploy for them to cover up the ideas they were actually upset about, like our quarantine and machine laws in the workplace. So they're convinced that if they take to the streets and talk to everyone else, they can start a strike and solve the issue. To the point where they did actually shut down an entire district within our city. In return, they claimed that if I was nice to them, they would give me the district back and stop what they were doing. But we do not negotiate with terrorists. So, like any other body of government that finds itself between the lens of the public eye, I decided to completely ignore them. Of course, in reality, I was just plotting in silence behind their backs, attempting to pass laws that would give me even more power and allow me to instate a religious military to put an end to these evolvers once and for all. The only problem with this plan was the fact that, well, we live in a democracy, and any laws that I pass are being passed in the open before their very eyes, and it requires their signature. I tried to pull some strings and make some promises, but it still wasn't enough to enact my private militia, and we were unfortunately back to square one. Except we were actually even one step further back than square one, because I still had to fulfill my promise. I didn't even get to pass the law that I wanted, and I still owed them something in return. As a result, I sat back and did nothing about the protests, which meant that I found it extremely interesting when a couple days later, someone came to my door crying about how the protests were so horrible and that someone needed to put a stop to it. How peculiar. Almost like I just tried to fix that and you guys said no. They claimed to have changed their mind and become open to giving me more power, but it would still require convincing some of the other members of the council, and considering that half of them still had an outstanding promise with me, things weren't looking good. So, rather than pass my military police law, I just decided to pass the Pathfinder Scout law instead, which also meant taking more promises on. In the meantime, while I waited for my promises to play out, I kept myself busy with building random stuff around the town until our next official court date. And all this building and waiting to serve my people had really made me do some introspection, think about who I was and what I was doing. I found myself building homes for the homeless, and even considering generous policies like equal pay. But I was immediately snapped out of my hallucinogenic state when I noticed a town off in the distance. Winterhome. I was reminded of what we were really here to do, and that was to take over the old town of Winterhome and expand so we could live to see another day. At least, that's what I thought we were supposed to do. But when I clicked on the location itself, I was greeted with a big red warning text that said this place was dangerous and I was not yet ready. So instead, I went back home and prepared myself. I fulfilled my promises to people, harvested resources, enacted some laws, and shook down all my citizens for money. Pretty soon, Winterhome was back on the agenda, and I knew I couldn't put it off forever. Dangerous or not, we would need it to save our people. Oh yeah, and the Faith Keepers also happened to give me an amazing idea during this time of sending the Evolvers over there to take care of Winterhome. I mean, if they succeeded and survived, then great. They can live over there by themselves and leave us alone. But if they die a tragic death, well, they would still be leaving us alone, so it was kind of a win-win situation. I thanked my follower for this amazing idea and sent the Evolvers over there immediately. However, once they arrived, it became pretty obvious that Winterhome was in no shape to be inhabited. There was a chance we could attempt to save the place using avalanches and tools, but it seemed like the better idea to just ravage the place to hell and take every piece of scrap metal we could find. I mean, from the sound of things, this place was basically akin to Chernobyl, with dangerous gases spewing from the earth. But when you consider that I'm only sending the Evolvers over there, the more deadly the fumes, the better. Well, that and the fact that I have a standing partnership with the Faith Keepers, and they would have kicked my knees in if I let the Evolvers start their own civilization. So, with that, we decided to blow up Winterhome and knock free any trapped debris that was under the ground so we could salvage it, launching us into Chapter 4. With the debris freed from the ground, the toxic fumes had also been freed up and were taking over the area. All we needed was 40 steam cores, and then we could build our new hyperdrive generator and leave this place forever. And it may seem horrible what I'm doing, sending people to their ultimate death and forcing them to scavenge cores while the rest of us sleep peacefully, but I mean, look at it from our perspective. We were sleeping peacefully. I mean, things were going great over here where we were living a gas-free life, going to work, inventing new ways to eat food, and this lady had so much free time that she built a mechanical cat to keep her company, complete with a fake coat from a seal. This was obviously very normal and not at all insane. Clearly I sided with the right people. Anywho, I decided to increase our efforts over in Winterhome by building even more extraction sites, which would dig into the snow and expose even more steam cores as well as dangerous gases, as you could tell by the deadly illness icon. For some reason, the Evolvers were not very good at taking the hint and still complained to me that they were upset about what I was doing. I had literally sent them all to gas hell to die, and they were still begging me, "Oh, please, make some robots that could do this for us. I don't want to die." Like, bro, I would never risk my beautiful robots over there in the gross gas fields. I have them working hard, delivering bundles of wheat from like 10 feet away from my town center. Why would I send them 10,000 feet away to risk falling into an acidic cavern of Winterhome? I did feel a little bad for the Evolvers though, so I made sure to send them some food so they wouldn't die of starvation at least. However, this still wasn't good enough for them, and they continued to harass me. They didn't even say thank you for the food, and instead they called me psychotic and threatened me with violence. This didn't hurt my feelings though, since I did send them here to die to begin with, so we were kind of even at this point. However, I still took the opportunity to accelerate their deaths and mine even deeper into the earth. In response, the Evolvers took to the power lines, cutting them in an attempt to interfere with our work, which made the Faith Keepers pretty upset, as they instantly recommended that I chop their heads off publicly.
Slay him, Father.
Father, I think he should live.
I think you should feed him to the lions, where he belongs.
We're supposed to be coming up with content ideas. You really want me to sit here and do this?
I decided that I would not behead the Evolvers. Instead, they would be put under severe surveillance to make sure that no one was fiddling with the machines after hours. Of course, this did mean that I would need to actually install the police watchtowers first, which meant two things. One, I had to actually research them, because at this time I didn't know how to build a police watchtower yet, and the second thing was that you can't just place a watchtower out in the open. Similar to the ventilation towers, it would have to go in an upgraded neighborhood, which meant that I had to actually build the Evolvers' homes. On the bright side though, in order to build them homes, I would have to frost break more ground and free up more toxic fumes, so it kind of canceled out. Although it seemed like the more toxic fumes that I exposed them to, the more upset they got, exclaiming that they wished death upon all Faith Keepers. I mean, the part that offended me more was them saying that we do nothing back home besides choke on food and drown in wine, which was totally not true. I mean, we worked hard over here for what we had, and wait, what are you guys voting on? Oh, geez. Okay, well, I mean, I guess we are opening up a bunch of bars over here, but like it's not what it looks like, okay? You know what? They'll probably never even find out that we did that because they're claiming that the toxic gases are infiltrating their lungs and pushing them to the brink of death. Now, this sounded pretty melodramatic to me, so I made sure to finally put up those police watchtowers and get a good look at the situation myself. This also meant that I could ensure they were continuing to grab our steam cores and I could keep down the protests that were happening. But to no surprise, the Evolvers were upset by my police watchtowers. My only question to them would be, why? The police have no reason to bother you unless you've done something wrong. And that's exactly what happened. Just a couple days later, after installing the police watchtowers, we caught an Evolver assassin who was sneaking around and stalking the Faith Keepers. He was keeping a journal handy of the times they entered and exited buildings and was likely planning out an attack to seek revenge upon us. Although it seems pretty unlikely anything like that would happen, considering that half of the Evolvers look like this nowadays. Despite all the hiccups we had seen in this operation so far, we were finally closing in on our 40 steam cores and completing our objective, which meant that I was able to bring the Evolvers back home and work on our generator. I probably could have scalped even more steam cores at a winter home and really let the Evolvers die, but part of me did genuinely feel bad for them. I mean, we were over here researching pharmaceutical buildings and literally getting healthier, while they were getting voluntarily less healthy with lung poisoning and neurotoxins. But despite my ever-flowing generosity to these individuals, they still responded to me with hatred. Our upgraded generator was the last thing we needed to survive the frost, and I had proven that we could outlast the weather, but they were still convinced that I was the problem and that I had to go. Yeah, I was not expecting that. The Evolvers had openly stabbed a man to death right in front of me, bringing us into Chapter 5, as well as a full-blown civil war between the factions. Of course, I would like to prevent any sort of civil war and make everyone get along, but this level of violence was just beyond that. There was no way we could ever go back to normal after this and pretend like they hadn't killed one of our own. The nicest thing I could offer them was to be permanently banished from the city. This was the point of no return and would decide the rest of our lives in New London. But I felt confident that it was the right thing to do. The Evolvers would be relocated to a city known as Windward Moor so that we could happily live here in New London. But that's all gonna have to happen on the next episode. So for now, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to leave a comment and like, and I hope you have a great day.